Hi everyone, thought I'd come on and do a couple more little bits for you. Right, here we go. So if you remember rightly, the hedgehogs had met the snake in the quarry. So here we go. The young boar slunk off, feeling very lonely, and hunted along the side of the lake until he came to a slippery patch of clay. The weight of his bristles caused him to overbalance on the slope, and he slipped and he fell into the water. But, like all hedgehogs, he was a good swimmer, and he soon found a pebble part of the bank and scrambled out of the lake. He shook himself and licked his chest and stomach with his long pink tongue. He had lost most of his fleas and lice in the water, and the few that had taken refuge on his head and ears were quickly dislodged by a scratch or two from one of his hind feet. His skin tingled, and he started to lick it again. As he did so, the saliva gathered in his mouth. His head bobbed up and down as his tongue went faster and faster. In an ecstasy of pleasure, he turned his head sharply, throwing little blobs of saliva on his back. He was performing the age-old rite of self-anointing, a mystery which no human understands. After a while, Quill trotted back and found the other hedgehogs. By then, the adder's bones were picked clean. At dawn, an angler fishing for trench in the lake found the disjointed vertebrae of a snake. Its head was still intact, though severed from its body, and the man thought that rats must have eaten the flesh from its bones. He returned to his fishing and saw at the edge of the lake a little pike, no more than an inch long, trying to swallow a tiny silvery roach, almost as big as itself. He sat watching his red-tipped float and marvelled at the pitiless cruelty of nature. Mattie and Quill were now almost full grown. Their mother was running with the old boar again. Although the mating season was over, she no longer slept in the nest. There's the picture of them. Looks like they're going up someone's garden path. The young hedgehogs continued to go for their supper of bread and milk every evening. They came down the garden path from their nest in the hedge, running and skipping in the shadows, tumbling down the paths and jostling each other at the plate, wading knee-deep in the bread and the milk. They ate noisily, their teeth snapping together loudly. They hiccuped and they sneezed milk from their nostrils from time to time. When they were tired of eating, they chased each other round and round the plate and ran along the concrete surrounds of their house looking for insects. When they walked, their longer back legs made them wobble, so they looked from behind like little brown bears. They were not afraid of the man and the woman who lived in the house, and freely allowed them to straighten their noses and forehead. Mattie was much smaller than Quill, but she was far more intelligent than her brother, and she quickly learnt to take a piece of milk-soaked bread from the woman's fingers. She knew the familiar sounds of the house, and she would eat her bread and milk quite happily, while the lights blazed and the sound of the radio came through the open window. Both she and Quill seemed to know when there were strangers in the house. They never came near if the woman and her husband had visitors. They had found the hay-filled flower pot in which their brother had lived at the end of his short life, and they often spent a night in it, not bothering to return to the nest. One afternoon, the man of the house was digging in the garden, and he rolled the flower pot out of his way with his foot. It rolled for a few feet and came to rest against a stone. He walked over to it to move it again, and inside he discovered was Mattie, stretched out on the hay, her white patch clearly visible. She was breathing calmly and quietly, in no way upset by the rough treatment which the pot had undergone. The man gently put the flower pot in its old place and packed pieces of slate under it to raise it above the damp of the ground. From then on, it was known as Mattie's pot. The old man, named Bert Schmale, lived at the end of the lane. He was very ignorant of the way of hedgehogs. He insisted that they dug up and ate potatoes, besides doing other damage in the garden. The year before, he had caught the old boar and thrown him into the dustbin thinking he had killed him, but the bin was nearly full, and the old hedgehog had soon recovered consciousness, clambered up onto the rubbish, and pushed off the loose-fitting lid. As he scrambled over the edge of the dustbin, he curled himself up into a ball, and his bristles broke the shock as he fell to the ground. When Schmau discovered that the dead hedgehog had escaped, his rage knew no bounds. One evening towards the end of August, the sow was eating a snail in old Bert's potato patch. He saw her in half light and rushed at her, brandishing a spade, which he had snatched from the tool shed as he ran by it. The hedgehog cowered meekly on the ground, waiting for the danger to pass, but Schmau sliced her head from her body with a single blow of the spade. Oh, he left the pathetic little body in the potato patch as a warning to "They other little vermints, darn 'em. I said I'd get 'em. I'll get the little vermints with me own eyes. A digging up me taties, he was," he told his wife. "But I've vanished 'em, off for shore, that's it. Last time we'll see 'em." Old Bert was a keen gardener, and he liked nothing better than to boast in the Cardiff Arms about all the cups he had won at the local show, but that year he did not win anything. Long before September the 21st, the date on which the show was held, all his best produce had been ruined by slugs and snails. Munching in the hedgerow. At the beginning of September, the hedgehogs were already preparing to hibernate. The rolls of fat were forming under their thick, woolly coats to protect them from the cold of the winter. Their blood was thickening, and the white corpuscles in it were increasing in number. Their glands were secreting antitoxins, and the skin around their mouth and eyes was growing less attractive to maggots and fresh flesh worms. They were eating so much more food that they were becoming sluggish and less inclined to play. Mattie and Quill carried more leaves and hay into their flower pot. They also took 2 clothes pegs, an onion, and a button into it. The hedgehogs, like humans, must have their toys. They stowed their treasures safely away behind the hay and the leaves. Neither of the young hedgehogs had hibernated before, nor had they been taught how to prepare their winter quarters, but they knew instinctively what they had to do. Soon the flower pot was snug with a thick carpet of leaves under a curtain of hay. Hedgehogs were originally natives of Central and South Europe, where the long, hot summers and dry winters are ideal for them. They spread to this country thousands of years ago, coming across the land bridge, which then joined England and France. And there are now about 50 million of them in Great Britain alone. Well, of course, this book was done 30 odd years ago, so there might be a different number now. They are less common in the north. There are very few of them in the Highlands of Scotland, and they are only just beginning to reach the Western Isles through hibernating families being carried there accidentally in bales of hay. So I'll read a little bit more in a minute, but just bear with me.